men who had things in their profiles like alt-right conspiracy theorist. On the dates, there was one man whom it seems like Vera genuinely liked. She describes him as her favorite, and she assigns him the pseudonym Jared. Vera followed a strict safety protocol on her dates, and she ran a background check on everyone she planned to meet with. But when she ran a background check on Jared, she found that just a few years prior, he had sent her an email personally promising to, quote, kill her slowly. He had sent this email to her at a time when she was a public champion for feminism, so she didn't know if he would recognize her personally or if he had simply found her email on a 4chan forum. When Vera met up with Jared, she was surprised to discover that he was shy, soft-spoken, and even sweet and self-reflective. He didn't seem to recognize her or remember that he had sent her death threats. He was very tall, a former D1 athlete. He described a hobby of his that started during the pandemic where he went alone to a series of restaurants around New York to try their desserts, and he kept a ranking of his favorite spots. She actually found Jared so interesting that he was one of the few men who she went on multiple dates with. But when Jared started to talk about politics, he grabbed the table and his leg began to shake. He shouted, quote, liberal white women are a plague on our society, close quote. He drank 11 iced coffees over the course of their date. At one point, he told a story about how a group of protesters harassed him for wearing a MAGA hat, and he reenacted the scene by standing up in the restaurant and shouting at Vera the same way that the protesters shouted at him. People in the restaurant got frightened by his shouting and cautiously watched Vera and Jared for the rest of their date. Vera says that when Jared talked about politics, his eyes changed and his behavior became erratic. He said to her, quote, if we lived in a different time, we would be hanging white liberal whores in the town square and dragging them through the street for the lies that they spread, close quote. Vera didn't say this in the article, but in an interview she mentioned that Jared did share that he had many concussions and traumatic brain injury symptoms from his years of playing a contact sport. Vera asked Jared to take a deep breath with her, which he did. He calmed down and again sat at the table, but later in the date, as Vera's hand rested on the table, he grabbed her wrist and his eyes changed again. He said, quote, white liberal women say horrible things about me and make everyone hate me and think I'm a bad person, close quote. Vera says that at this point he was no longer looking at her, but rather staring off into the distance as if he were in a trance. Vera asked, what did they say about you? And Jared snapped out of it and said, oh, not me. I meant Donald Trump. Vera says that he repeated this problem over a few dates together as she got to know him. He would speak about Donald Trump in the first person as if he himself were Donald Trump. Vera writes, quote, it became clear to me that he truly loved Trump, not just because he identified with Trump, the politician, but because he identified with Trump, the person, being considered bad by progressive standards, close quote. On their second date, Jared remained calm the whole time. He described his childhood in the Northeast. He came from a nice family. He went to a good school. He was a sports prodigy, but he started drinking and doing drugs when he was a teenager. Then he says, quote, something really bad happened, close quote, so he got sober. Vera calculates that he was still dealing with addiction when he sent her death threats. Jared said, quote, for sports, I created an alter ego that helped me harness the violent and dominant energy that I needed to tap into the stronger part of me. That was how I could do more than I thought was possible. The problem was I couldn't turn it off. As long as I was winning, my coaches didn't care what I did. So I was always in it, always partying, anxious about guys from another school, showing up to a party to beat the shit out of my teammates and me. I would drink and do drugs to calm myself down, and then we would go beat up the other guys, close quote. This quote, while troubling, was one of my favorite parts of the article because it gives us some insight into how an otherwise normal and even talented person can become radicalized, and it speaks to a greater societal trend of how institutions and role models can encourage young men to foster violent or aggressive tendencies so long as it benefits the institution, like a nation's military or a college football team, even if that comes at great personal cost to the young man in the form of traumatic brain injury or mental health problems, or in the case of Jared, loneliness. Because it will be very difficult for him to find a life partner if he can't control his violent outbursts, even on a first date. Jared also shares that he spends weekends helping young men with mental health problems. On their last date, Vera and Jared were walking through a park when Vera told him that they couldn't keep seeing each other because she disagreed with many of his beliefs. Jared was confused, and he told Vera that he thought they had agreed on most